share their precious view on mainstreaming mental health and conversations.
So just check, can you all hear me? Does it sound alright? Okay. So it's a pleasure to be here today at the Women Economic Forum 2019. I'm Hilda Callop. I'm a healer, teacher and writer from the UK, and mental health is one of my passions and something I want to talk about on as many opportunities as possible. So thank you for being here today and joining the conversation. So for me, mainstreaming mental health conversations, well, why are we still talking about this in 2019? Why have we not mainstreamed mental health conversations in the way that we talk about physical health? I mean, I find it shocking. Working as a healer, I do energy healing. When I take client consultations, I am asking everybody that I see about their mental, emotional and spiritual health as well as their physical health. So for me, they all go together in a very holistic way because they all interact and affect the other. When you're trained in energy healing and you're working with the meridian system in the body, you're working with the chakras and the aura, and things that, subtle energies that we can't see, and you're working very closely with those subtle energies, you are very aware of the holistic element of the body. So for me, it's almost shocking that we're still not talking about things in the way that I would talk about mental health with my clients. It's just part of a standard client intake. So I also want to say that we are all complicit in some way in our not having mainstream mental health in our conversations, because years and years ago, before I became a healer, I was working as a public relations director for the biggest public relations consultancy in the world, and really on the outside I had all the labels of success, but on the inside I was really miserable. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I love public relations, I love communicating, but it was in a high-tech industry. It wasn't what I wanted to do at all, and I was just pretending. I was just sort of winging it and faking it, and eventually I was surviving every day on about 5 cups of coffee with 2 heaped teaspoons of sugar, and that was kind of my meal, no breakfast, rushing out for an hour-long commute to the office, working 12-hour days, and I was a complete workaholic. And eventually, of course, my body packed up. So this is about 20 years ago, and I started having panic attacks, and I couldn't go into the office, and eventually I had to leave that job. And actually, it was a gift for me to have that kind of experience, because after that I retrained as a healer. And it took me about 2 years to recover from severe anxiety, from depression. I think I must have gone through a whole load of trauma, and I had previous trauma that I was clearing, and it all just built up. And I was complicit in the silence that surrounds mental health. The reason why mental health is not mainstream conversation, we're all complicit in that, and we can all move one step forward and change the conversation. So to the extent that years later I started working for a mental health charity, and then we had to tick the boxes before we took the job on. Have you ever had anxiety? Have you ever had depression? Have you ever had, any other, have you had bipolar or schizophrenia or any of these other conditions? And I just said no on the form. And this was, somebody who I can consider myself to be open and honest in my discussion, yet I thought that I wouldn't get the job if I was actually honest in the way I filled in the form. And this was applying to work for a mental health charity. But working for that charity, I realised that actually it was a bonus, it was a plus to have that kind of experience, and that was my first real workplace that I saw that the honesty was there, and they walk the talk and they practice what they preached, and I kind of started becoming more open about the conversation, and then I vowed to really come out and to be as open and honest, and that's why I'm here today about my situation, and just to say how common it is in the UK. It's 1 in 4 people who have had some kind of mental unwellness and who then go on to recover. So in the way that we talk about physical health, and if I said, have any of you had high blood pressure in the past or have high blood pressure now, and we put our hands up and say, yay, I've had high blood pressure and I've recovered from it and I'm happy to say this, or I have it and I'm on this medication, I would like to see at the same show of hands when I say, well, have any of you had anxiety, stress, depression, PTSD, and say, yes, I've had that, and I'm on medication, and I'm managing my condition, and I'm going into work every day, and it's fine. You know, because mental health is a continuum, just as physical health is a continuum, and we can't be expected to be, you know, either mentally unwell one day and mentally well the next day, you know, because physical health doesn't work like that either. You know, you might have glasses for a few years and then not have glasses for a few years, or you might have diabetes and then due to lifestyle changes and nutritional changes and better sleep and more exercise, you won't have diabetes. You know, type 2 diabetes is reversible, and that's how you can look at mental health. So now I'm very blessed to have a radio show on a station called News for the Soul, and I talk with healers on the station, and we talk about different modalities like emotional freedom technique that releases negative thinking, negative beliefs, and the way that can help address mental health issues. We talk very openly on the program about you know, these things. So I would like to see more leaders stepping up. You know, the way that we are here at the Women Economic Forum, and you're here today. You know, and you know, this conversation is significant and really, really important, and you understand how important it is. I would like to see more leaders stepping forward and talking about mental health openly in the way we talk about physical health. So, for example, in the UK, we have royalty, we have Prince William and we have Prince Harry, and more they are talking about you know, the things that they went through after their mother died, and the way that it affected them, and the grief, and how they're still coming to terms with that. And you know, and I read recently that Prince Harry will be making a documentary series with Oprah Winfrey, and it will be aired later this year on her new TV station, Apple Plus TV, and that gives me hope and it gives me optimism that we are moving much more quickly now. You know, we've had a little impetus and little baby steps, but we're moving much more quickly now into mainstreaming these conversations, so it gives me real hope that it'll just all come out into the open very, very quickly, you know, in the next year or so, and people would just be talking openly and honestly with each other, because in the UK, 1 in 4 people is living with a condition of either anxiety or depression, and it accounts for the second biggest reason why people miss work, about $2 billion a year lost to productivity. So why are we not having leaders stepping up in the workplace and talking about, you know, the managers talking about their own experiences? I know that Ernst & Young, EY, and now they have an initiative called We Care, which has been running for 3 years, and it was set up as a result of employees saying that they were suffering from severe anxiety. So there were lots and lots of calls to their employee assistance program at Ernst & Young, and they decided to set up these We Care days. So in the We Care days, the managers themselves talk about how they are living with anxiety, for example, and how they are overcoming it, or how they're managing their anxiety. So that's great, and ever since that initiative has been set up, people are now much more open, and which is how we should be. So again, that gives me hope that these initiatives exist. Well, I'd like to see them much more commonplace, obviously, in as many companies as we can find. And again, you know, being a healer, I look at prevention. So how can you, you know, prevent your condition in the way that you might go and join a gym so you don't get overweight? How can you build mental strength as well? So why are there not free massages in the workplace to help de-stress? Why are there not free reflexology or subsidized reflexology? Why not acupuncture? Why not, you know, you get free gym membership, but what about all these other beautiful complementary therapies that are available, and why are they not available in every workplace in the world? Because it's going to make up for the productivity that you lose from people being off sick. So that's what my vision is, to see that happen, and I see it as perfectly possible. I see it as perfectly achievable. Really, it just makes good sense. Good you know, sense in terms of business, good sense in terms of relationships, just caring for the people that work for you and for yourself. So it's possible. I mean, all these things are there to for us to really talk about mental health in a significant way that it should be talked about, and for us to just treat it as a part of our holistic selves. So that's really all I wanted to say about the topic. One last thing, I've written a book on mindfulness, the children's picture book. It's called Donna and Dermot on the Move. It's about a girl called Donna who moves house, and she starts looking at the past, and she's very depressed because she doesn't want to move to the city, and she runs away and escapes back to the countryside. And it's about her dog Dermot, because animals very much live in the present, and they're very playful and joyful, teaching her about the beauty of the present moment and to live in the present moment and appreciate that. So yes, and I'm hoping with that, as it sort of spreads and goes into schools, that children will grow up understanding the beauty of living in the moment and not worrying too much at all about the past or thinking too much about the future, which is how we should all be. So thank you very much again for listening.
I'd like to invite my other speaker to come on the stage, join us.
Hello everybody. Wanted to thank first WEFAP for having me here and giving me an opportunity to participate in this forum with this like-minded leaders, and especially this topic, because it certainly is a passion of mine. I'm Shelly Chopra. I'm from US. I grew up in Delhi, in North Delhi, Shalimar Bagh. This is where I lived and grew up, and I moved to US about 25 years ago. And I'm a healthcare strategist by profession, really a techie nerd, a data nerd, which is probably what most of us who move out of India are. And I'm also a recovering corporate executive. I say recovering because I've spent years sort of being the hamster on the wheel, climbing the corporate ladder, being part of that race, that ambition that we call ourselves. And I very much related to Hilda what you were talking about. You're there, you have the next goal you set up to, and you have your eye on the goal. And while life is happening on the side as well, life happens, you get married, you have babies, but you are also up for that promotion. So you do what you need to do to make it happen, and it all comes at a cost, which you're just really unaware of. Because growing up in education, you're taught maths, your science, your English, you're taught how to make goals, how to pursue goals. But growing up, I did not learn how to prioritize self-care, how to make that a goal, how to make that a commitment. I would say I grew up being very efficient in hustling to become a good mother, a good wife, a good daughter, all the roles I play, a good corporate executive, a successful corporate executive. 6 months, I'm going to climb up to the next ladder. In another 6 months, I'm going to make it to the VP, and then I'm going to make it to the C-suite, and I made it to all of that. And when I did, all through that hustle of becoming, I did not prioritize being, just being present in life, just being whole in life, just being really prioritizing being whole. So my rat race, my race of that hustle to become came at a cost of lack of personal care. And at some point, I guess your body, there's an intervention that happens, and for me it happened. I've battled with depression all my life. Probably my first exposure to depression was when I was 3 years old. I grew up in a household where probably my father was depressed, although it was never diagnosed back then. Because neither did we know about mental health, nor did we talk about it, and we surely did not address it. So really, when you have your highs or lows, I grew up with the terminology of mood swings. You just have mood swings, and you just wrestle your way through it, and which is what I did in my 20s, which is what I did in my 30s. And really, when I got to my 40s, I think my body said, I've had enough. So I had my first panic attack traveling for work back from Saudi Arabia, which is, I was doing a lot of international and national travel. And so I took a pause and I said, I'll go to the doctor's office. Maybe 3 days of rest would do it. But That didn't happen. It was the beginning of my unraveling, and thank God it was the beginning of my unraveling, because I really needed to completely fall apart to really pull back together. So last year I got diagnosed with bipolar 2, and I'm here to admit, when I got my diagnosis, I was shocked to realize how deep of shame and stigma I carried within me for mental health. While I would have probably given lectures to all my kids about, oh, self-care and depression and anxiety, it's based on your lifestyle and you can overcome it, I completely lost grip on how to see myself as whole. I felt I couldn't show up in my life, in my personal life, in my family life, certainly in my corporate life, because I didn't see myself as a whole, because that label translated to you're imperfect, you're unreliable on that. So my journey after that, for about 6 months after I got my diagnosis, where I paused, really brought me face to face with, why do we really carry that stigma about mental health? I felt isolated. I isolated myself as well, and I felt isolated because I couldn't find places where I could go talk about it and relate to other people. My resources to learn about mental health was really, thank God for Google and privacy of it at night. I would Google it, which is also very, very harmful on that. So why don't we mainstream mental health conversations? In my opinion, the number one reason is because we don't understand it enough. We don't know about it enough. As Hilda said, it is really no different than any physical illness. It is caused because of accumulation of lot of stresses and imbalances in our body, cause genetic reasons or lifestyle reasons, and it raises it up. How different is that than when you end up with diabetes or blood pressure? You could have genetic predisposition to it and your lifestyle would surface it. I remember when I got diagnosed with bipolar, as silly as it sounds, but really at that time I wish I had cancer, because it made it so much easier to give sympathy to myself, to go garner sympathy or help. But to come out and say, I deal with depression, I have anxiety, I've been diagnosed with bipolar, I really couldn't bring myself to come up and talk about it. So one of the biggest barriers to why we have not been able to mainstream mental health conversations is because we don't know about it. So in my opinion, really coming from the corporate world, I feel there's a big opportunity for us to raise awareness about it. And that doesn't really just start in the corporate world, that starts in the personal life. That starts in schools, where we know it's one of the biggest silent epidemics, even in our schools, among our youth and our teens, where they're suffering with depression and anxiety. To raise the conversation about that yes, it's real. Yes, it's happened, and here's why it happens. Here's what the contributing factors are. Let's teach ourselves how we can diagnose our own triggers for that. Let's teach ourselves what we can do, where to go for help, what are the resources we can go tap into for help, whether it's in a personal space or in the professional space. Let's teach ourselves where we can reach out and find safe places to talk about it, to relate, so we don't feel isolated about it. So let's form an infrastructure to really get to know about it. The second part I feel an obstacle is we don't have the tools and resources that teach us how to own it. Being diagnosed with mental illness can come with a lot of stigma and fear, and probably perpetuates your cycle of anxiety and depression, in return. Knowing how to see it as just any other imbalance in your body, as any other illness, and learning the tools and techniques to own it, to really process it, to see yourself as whole. I had to learn to relearn to see myself as whole. I had to find my way out of my darkness to really get to a point where I saw my imperfections as my own strength. Frankly, I got to a point I kind of like my craziness. It's my kind of craziness. But I had to come to that point. I had to learn to own it. I had to learn to integrate it in my life and to build my new lifestyle around my state of my being, state of my mental being, state of my physical being, which means before I would have 14 to 16 hour work days, and now I would prioritize self-care, eating right, exercising, I'm big into yoga and meditation. I really kind of came back to the basics of self-care. I gave myself permission for self-care. If I could give myself permission and make a priority to show up at a 7 a.m. meeting after having dropped kids at school, after their breakfast being done, pick them up, do my calls, still manage everything in the family life, yes, I can make it a priority that when I wake up in the morning, 1 hour is my exercise time. And that was just something I had to relearn, rewire myself. My third reason I would say why we don't mainstream conversations about mental health is not only do we not understand it, not only do we not have tools to own it, we also are not kind to ourselves when we learn about mental health. And that was probably the biggest and the hardest lesson in my journey, is I had to learn to be kind to myself about it. Kind to myself in the moments where I don't have it all together, where I am not on top of my A game, and really being compassionate towards it, because being compassionate let down my guard and I was able to integrate that into my life. So really working, with a lot of alternative therapies, yoga, meditation, acupuncture, a lot of it. Even though I come from a culture, and I am ironically in healthcare, but when I got through my journey, the first thing was, here's your label, here's your meds, and you have to be on meds to get on short-term disability to take some time off, which was really an inverted cycle. My insurance system was not incentivizing wellness. It was incentivizing treatment. And treatment and wellness need to be brought in together. So I researched a lot, I brought in, and so now I work with large healthcare corporations in talking to them about incorporating strategy of wellness in the corporate leadership structures. If we as leaders don't own this part, don't own that part within us, show us as whole, we're really not setting up a culture of openness and authenticity. I also support a foundation called International School of Story. In fact, in the audience, I have the CEO of International School of Story Foundation. We work with folks across the globe, and in offering training, coaching, strategies for coping with depression and anxiety, but more importantly, we believe in the power of stories. For me, when I had my coming out moment, well, I don't do anything small. I, of course, came out on Facebook Live event and talked about my story, which I was very gently but firmly nudged by my friend to say, own your story. I cannot tell you how liberating it was for me, because I was not closeted and holding this burden of what I have and putting on a front. It brought forth many reactions. I'll be honest, coming from a community where we don't talk about mental health, I had mixed reactions from friends, from family. The reactions ranged anywhere from, that's so brave, your honesty and your openness is so brave, did you know I actually also suffered with depression, or so-and-so and my family suffers with depression, to, why are you depressed? You have 2 beautiful children, a great husband, a job, you have no reason to be depressed. I don't choose to be depressed or mentally ill, I am. That's something I had to work on. And I also had reactions on, and I think folks who have grown up here in India might be able to relate to it. You'll be fine, you can overcome it, just pray some more. That'll fix everything. And while prayer and faith is a big part of us in this journey, like any other illness, that's not the only solution. And it really brought me back to what prevents us from really facing it and owning it and not viewing it as something that makes us perfect. So kindness and compassion, it brought me back to that. So in the end, I would like to summarize by, I think for us to be able to mainstream the mental health conversations, we really need to open ourselves up to looking at a different paradigm. A paradigm that really sees this as any other form of physical illness, as any other form of imbalance that our lifestyles, our composition of our bodies create in ourselves, and it is treatable. And it is also reversible. Probably much to the negation of several clinical studies, I believe, I have reversed my bipolar. I was diagnosed last year, I got on drugs, I did the medicines for 6 months, but then I dropped it and I decided I was gonna, in my own words, it was going to be Shelley versus bipolar. That's where my type A personality kicked in. and I was going to kick ass, which I did. So I'm off medications. It's as a result of lifestyle changes, of prioritizing self-care, of incorporating a lot of integrated care in it. And at this point, I'm passionate about spreading the message of that and taking it especially to corporate leaderships and bringing it to our youth. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. I appreciate it.
So I think at this point, the format is that we welcome any questions or comments you guys might have for Heather or I.
So great to hear. You have a similar story.
Oh, really? That's, every time I talk about it, and I thank Emra over and over again, where she was like, just talk about your story. And truly, it really is very empowering.
Absolutely.
When you talk, I feel every time I talk about it and somebody else comes up and says, oh, it's similar, I relate to it personally, I relate to it because somebody in my life has it. There's just as you shed a layer. You really just shed a layer and you go, it's okay.
And I'm really glad that they've got it up to this forum, and especially in India, the people have begun to talk about it.
Yes.
So, and then there's so much of coming out now.
Yes.
And it's helped a lot of, like I work with mental health also, I'm a healer as well, and I run an NGO for special children, so we work with different abilities. So what is happening is that even in India, like I have a son who's in the autistic framework, he has Asperger's, and initially how the journey began was that I was told that he looks normal and he's good looking and you can't make it out, so if you tell people he will not get married. So I was like, he's 6 years old or he's 9 years old, and an incident which is going to happen 20 years hence. How will his whole life be dependent on a marriage which may or may not happen in today's scenario?
And I totally relate to that because for me, when I came out, my mother was actually going to join us there. I remember it was a big deal.
Absolutely.
And there's a stigma. And even today, everybody supports me. But not everybody talks to me. It's almost like we're afraid to talk about it, right?
Absolutely.
And to the point of what you made about son, we don't know. But why do we need to keep it hidden? Why can't we own it that that's just part of who we are?
So I literally started a movement, where people have come out and my son is now going to be 18. He is in a normal school. I mean, he can probably do entirely, but he knows it, And the day before, we had to research something about mental health, and I said I need to find that. So he said, I already have all the stuff downloaded. So I said, you have it all? So he says, yeah, because I need to check on whatever's going around with me. So I said, and he is wanting to study psychology and physics, so something with neuroscience. So I said, this is going to be one of the most amazing things that a child with autism who has issues is trying to study psychology. But the attitude made it all different, right? So, because there was a time when we were doing it personally, and then when we started the NGO, I asked him, do you want to be the brand ambassador, or do you want to come along, because I want to do it anyway. But I in no way want you to someday turn around and say that, Mom, you piggybacked on my illness to get famous or whatever. It has to be your conscious. So he thought for it, and he said, fine. But when it really happened, then the whole world knew it. So it was a little difficult for him. But then now he's happy. He says, I'm 3% of the intelligent people in the world.
And that's true. I also feel, and coming from healthcare, and I did put in a lot of time and talked to a lot of psychologists, I also firmly believe there are two parts to it. One, I don't think we fully understand mental illness yet.
Absolutely.
We don't. It's what we don't understand, what fits out of the box. I'll speak for US healthcare system, and I think it's somewhat similar in here in India as well or across the globe. We really need to label it and put it in another box.
Absolutely.
My son is on spectrum for ADHD. He's very creative, very brilliant. So he doesn't fit into the box of the public schools. So they're like, oh, he's ADHD, maybe he needs to be an anti-anxiety med. So I was like, no. The fact that he thinks differently, the fact that he processes differently doesn't make it not normal. And I would say that's probably the same even for depression or anxiety.
Absolutely.
It's a different state of being when I'm. For me, when I'm in my low, of course there are symptoms of it that I have to deal, but it's a gift to me because really in that state, I have this expanded capability of empathy, of relatedness, of emotional empathy at that time. I really am, I'm working from a different place. In my quote-unquote anxiety or bipolar, I'm just in this heightened state of creativity.
Absolutely.
I mean, my best of my poetry and best of my work comes out. And when I got diagnosed, I thought my corporate career or my career is going to come to an end. I came out, I went back, and I'm successfully running a couple of ventures. You know, I have my own consulting firm, I'm running different ventures, I'm writing. I suddenly have the space to support my passions with that. So did it make me imperfect? I think in some ways, my imperfection, I think, thank God, has been sort of my biggest gift.
Absolutely.
And drugs and meds or no meds, it's when I could see it because I really have expanded capability of emotional relatedness in either my low or my heightened state. And when you study it, call me whatever you want to. I kind of love my kind of crazy, if that's what it is.
It gets you connected because you're able to understand more.
Yes,
You know, like earlier it was all about me and where I was coming. But now I can look at people or probably talk with people from where they are coming. So what happens, relationships every kind are much better because I've stopped, you know, because I wasn't a very judgmental person, but yes, since I was organized and since I was better, I would even go to somebody's house and say how messy. But now I can understand that in that mess, that's, you know, probably it's not their priority to clean the house. They're probably doing something which is more productive or gives them more happiness, you know.
So yeah, I do think there's a lot we need to learn even from a healthcare perspective.
Absolutely.
About mental illness. And if you think about it, just till about 1960s, we did not understand mental health. We quarantined people. It's been here in India, it was there in US. So we've come from that culture of great systematic stigmatization of mental health to now we're opening. And now we're at that crux where we're starting to open up and talk about it. And you know, as we say, how do we raise it to a point? It's a mainstream conversation, whether it's in the corporate world, whether it's in the education world, whether it's in the family life. And the more we mainstream it, the more we're going to learn about it. How many people knew about diabetes or blood pressure, right? Now we mainstream that conversation. We all know how we get there. We all know how we need to manage it. We all know how to reverse it. Why can't we do the same about that when it is one of our silent epidemics? 1 in 6 people worldwide do deal with some aspect of depression or anxiety or any mental illness. So we do need to talk about it.
No, in fact, I think each person deals with their kind of mental illness, right? The percentage is very small and we don't talk about borderline, right?
Yes.
But if you talk about with any person, everybody has a phobia, everybody has a fear, everybody has a trigger, everybody has some or the other emotional issue, where it is expression or where it is anger, maybe, you know. So even a very calm person might have some anxiety or some kind of issue. So I think it's just that the special people or people with mental health are a little bit more where it's visible. Otherwise, I think each individual has mental issues.
I think we are challenging the boundaries of the box we've defined
right.
on normal and mental health.
Right.
We're starting to look at the box differently. Maybe those boundaries of that box doesn't need to be fixed. It is relative and it's unique to every person as you talk about. My bipolar is just my bipolar. There's nobody else who can have exactly my kind of bipolar. Because guess what? I almost wait for my highs because my best of my poetry comes out at that time. Best of my projects come out. So my team loves it when I'm on the high and at 2 a.m. at night I'm sending them the business strategy plans. They're like, oh, we love it when you get to that space. So I've learned to be open about it. I've learned to cash in on it. Cash in on that uniqueness that is me. So the more we get rid of that box, that predetermined definitions, the more we elevate the stories, we're going to normalize the conversation.
I love diversity, and it's one of the things I teach. Inclusion in diversity. We're all the same, we're different. Do you think that mental illness should be seen merely as a diversity? So a difference that we all that are the same, whether you are race, religion, whatever it is, disability, that mental health is just another diversity. Because we've learned to include all the others. We teach highly on them. it's expected in any community now that all those diversities are respected. Is that something that should be
I
included?
personally do. Not only do I believe that, it's just our state of being. And it's our state of being, it's what makes us unique. And I say that being conscientious that there are certain conditions, certain levels, which do require clinical intervention and all. I do want to acknowledge that. But for the most part, it's what makes us different and unique is really that spectrum of our mental abilities. I don't want to call it mental illness, it's really our mental abilities. Just like we say our emotional empathy. We've now come to a point we all recognize each one of us are on a different spectrum of emotional empathy, of intellectual thing. Why not on our mental capabilities to deal with our emotions? We're on the spectrum there. So to your point, Amber, I view it as a different spectrum of our diversity. And I say that being conscious of the fact that let's not forget that certainly in mental illness, there are certain points which require valid clinical intervention. So I don't want to minimize that. But I think we're too quick to overdiagnose it. We're too, the box is too broad right now. Our spectrums are too broad right now. I mean, I'll say ADHD is one of the most overdiagnosed and common diagnoses everywhere. And now, so is depression, anxiety, bipolar. That kind of gets lumped in there. Why? Because, like you said, who doesn't deal with depression or anxiety in our day-to-day life?
And having a clinical diagnosis is different. That is also something we need to spread. Because somewhere what is happening is become such a big umbrella that everybody is depressed and he thinks that it's clinical depression. There is a difference.
It is very much
being depressed for a certain amount of time.
Situational depression is very different than a clinical diagnosis.
Absolutely.
And that's where the education part comes in. It's human behavior to have situational anxiety, situational depression, situational aspect. And then there is a different spectrum where you have a clinical diagnosis and a different way of handling it, which is still not bad. It's just an aspect of your physical being, physical health, and you need to help.
Like another
I think as a healer,
absolutely.
when I see a client, for the first consultation, I'll see them for at least an hour and a half, and I'll see each person I see as an individual, and it's a very comprehensive questionnaire that we fill in. And because I've had the experiences that I've had, like you have, with my mental well-being being up and down, and having managed that for a very long time now with meditation, and having that insight with people I see. When you see a doctor in modern medicine, they'll see you for 10 minutes usually, and it's 10 minutes, and what can they do in 10 minutes? It's kind of, almost crowd control. The palette of care that they have, where they can choose from what they want from modern medicine, which is amazing in what it can do, and also from the complementary health. So we need to marry up those two systems and individualize it. And it's happening, but it's happening very slowly, really, at the moment, and it needs to just speed up. And it's very possible. I mean, in the UK, you have the National Institute for Care and Health Excellence, NICE, and they still don't recognise emotional freedom technique, and so they just fund it because it's so new. It's only a 50-year modality, and it's, acupuncture is still not properly recognised either, and that's been going for thousands of years. So the funding is just not there. We need to offer a palette, and I'm afraid to say that the big pharma is really doing what it can to stop that palette, the box being spread wide open, which is what I would love to see is it's the client coming first and not the pharmaceutical companies coming first.
So should we get away with, I'm sorry, should we get away with the term patient?
What was the question?
Should we get away with the term patient?
Patient. Instead of client, I mean, what do you think would be a nice, service user isn't a particularly nice term either, so.
But better than patient, I guess.
Yes.
It's making our treatment person-centric versus patient-centric.
Right, yes.
Right? So that's a term we've been using, when we talk about healthcare, is let's make it person-centric. The person as a whole. Versus patient-centric. Because that assumes something is wrong and must be fixed, and then you
something
move on.
is wrong,
That's person-centric.
And it's all about balance, as you were saying. And we had almost, I wouldn't say, actual near-death experiences, but in the way that we had our experiences, we are like, we've been reborn, we're like phoenixes rising up again.
Absolutely, probably the experiences, and then I think that's why storytelling or inspirational storytelling is so important, because there's somebody who's been there and has been able to, travel through that and then become somebody else. So there is hope that there is.
Well, for me, I had a personal experience with it. When I got diagnosed with bipolar, it was just so hard on me that I went to my darkest place. And I'll admit that at that time, I truly experienced despair, because I just really felt shattered, and I couldn't see how I would bring myself home. And on top of it, I don't take medications, but then I had to be on medications to really take some time off work, which is such a screwed up system to begin with if you think about it. But when I was taking medications, the side effect of medications are hallucinations, suicidal thoughts. So if I was not crazy enough before, I certainly was experiencing craziness during the 3 months I took it. And I do remember during that time, there was a time where I vividly remember that moment where I felt such despair that I did find myself, my car parked, there is a dam close to our house. And I remember almost seeing me as a third person, that I'm there. There's a part of me that says, of course you're not going to do something. Of course you're smart enough and you understand it. But there's also, I am removed from the experience where I am there because I don't see hope. And at that very moment, randomly on my phone, I ended up just, I was mindlessly surfing, landing up on a podcast, and that podcast was about people with bipolar. And I vividly remember I heard that 10 minutes of story of a guy who was talking about he was bipolar 1. I mean, I'm really on the low end of bipolar 2, who was dealing with mania, and how he integrated his new self into the life, and he made a new life around it. And right in that moment, those 10 minutes of hearing somewhere subconsciously clicked, and that was my lifeline. So I'm just the biggest proponent of, because you just never know what your story might relate to in somebody else. And yes, you can have a life, and yes, you can have a normal life, and yes, you can have career success, like everything you could have with any other type of illness, with mental health. And I certainly am a living proof of that. So I believe in power of stories.
And even more than you could even imagine. If I had entered my life when I was in despair, I would not have had my 2 children here. I would not have been able to buy my own house. I always thought I had to have a partner to buy my own house, and I had that self-confidence now to buy my own house. I have a successful healing practice. I teach spiritual healing. I've written 2 picture books. I've 100 pages into another book. Radio host, public speaker. It's just like reborn.
You're reborn with a purpose. So I never thought, but yes, I think my biggest gift was really being, I wouldn't say being diagnosed, but I finally embraced all of me.
So my question, ladies, to you both is, I'm thinking of a quote, to thy own self be true. And regardless if you're going to a doctor or a counselor or a therapist or a healer, whoever, how much of self-awareness would you attribute to where you are today?
100%.
It was my beginning. I use the term unraveling. It truly was unraveling, because I really came back to the very basics. The very basics of self-love, self-care, self-awareness. And that does play a big part in my management, because I'm so self-aware, I can tell, I don't feel right about it. I tune into different levels of awareness, then type A, I've got a plan, I've got a calendar, go. I still go.
Yes.
I still run at 200 miles an hour, because that's just the kind of person I am, but I come from a different place.
Yes. Yeah.
So we all have it. I don't think this is something that I had to learn, but I learned to come back to it and honor that space and really make that space an intentional priority for me.
I have a question around that the consciousness, more talk around mental health is happening. And we here in India, specifically the sector I'm working, the financial sector, which is MNCs, kind of the culture is driven by UK or US. And in our company that we have a 24 hours helpline, anybody can call whenever there is
Very
illness
good.
and all. And but the thing is that the colleagues of mine, when they're into that kind of situation, they privately talk about it over tea or coffee, but they never called up that helpline
Because
they
you're
thought
afraid.
that company will get to know
Yes.
that this person is there.
I did not call my own helpline even in US because I was like, do I really want them to know about it?
Yeah.
I felt that.
That's my point is that companies are coming with the policies, maybe government policy or some sort of social awareness, they have to go by that. But if it is not serving the purpose, then what's the
You were
solution?
absolutely right, and that's why I talked about sort of what we go for with the corporate culture is setting up the EFT line and voice assistance program or the 24-hour line or having access to all this conversation, that you don't feel the fear and stigma that should you be diagnosed or should you call in, that gets used, you know, sort of against you in the corporate culture. I mean, I certainly felt it. I had just nabbed a really big promotion, you know, C-suite, and here I'm already, and then I was petrified that they would know that I'm bipolar because my own self-talk in my head was, they are going to perceive me as not dependable, sort of crazy and predictable, because that's how I saw myself on that. So you're absolutely right. While we're putting in the programs, I think the missing link here is awareness and normalizing of the conversation so we feel open enough to actually even leverage the resources, because we're not.
It's pretty much relevant. I mean, if somebody is going up the ladder to the corporate, and whenever we are having our HR training, we said that your physical exercise and your meditation is must, because you need a good mind and good body together to be at the top. So if somebody can take stress and going into the mental illness, will the company also would like to have?
Absolutely. There is actually data that proves that lack of management of mental well-being in corporate environments has a direct and tangible impact, negative impact on the productivity, you know, on absenteeism, on the corporate productivity and everything. So forget coming from an altruistic point of view, it actually is a very valid business case that organizations need to invest in that from a business perspective. I mean, you know, I'm a data person, so I'll spit out my data. I mean, there is a very tangible return on investment when you invest in these kind of programs. So more and more corporations are starting to become open, and that's part of the work, you know, I'd like to do is really working in them and speaking and then really helping them design those programs of that well-being, so that there is a bridge to then the preventative or management programs that are.
You know, I'd like to add something, since I work with children and older people also. You know, we are doing a lot of stuff. Clinically, a lot is happening. Corporates are doing their work. There are people who are, but there is no synergy between everybody. And another thing, it has to start very young. We have become actually a society which is very mechanical, and a corporate society where we are told that only target in life is to reach that top position. How can you reach the top position when you hide your true self, right?
Yes.
When you don't share anything because the competitor is going to take advantage of you, right?
Absolutely.
And then you have to constantly present your best. So with the passage of time, with the passage of time, what happens? You don't know who you are yourself, right? Because I have bipolar too, and I suffered from a stroke in 2011, and I was the Miss Perfect person, right? So the doctors couldn't diagnose it. I had to self-diagnose, and then when they saw my other side, because when I would have the downside, not even my family would get to know. My partner didn't know about it, you know. I would cry in the washroom, cover up, wear more makeup, do more stuff. So everybody said, how come you had a stroke? You're the happy, perfect person. But I said, no, I look the happy, perfect person. I'm the frustrated, stressed, over-organized, and overworked person. So the stroke was, I said, my son was the best thing that happened to me. And the second best thing was when I had a stroke at 38, I was on the bed. And now Miss Perfect couldn't do anything about it. I actually fall there. You know, even getting up and having a bath was in, you know. So I had to build, actually, from starting to learning to walk. And another thing that happened, my memory, I had a part of memory loss. And my recollective process is a little slow. I was very fast, and you know, people would ask me questions, and I was like, and here my sons would ask me, where is that thing? And I would like, wait. And my kids were like, so I said, wait. Then I had to explain it to them, then Mama, you see the computer buffering? Mama's brain is buffering. So, you know, because my husband would get stressed, so every day I would say, So they would keep waiting. I said, then it's not coming, the information. And maybe after 24 hours, imperfection is perfect. And you don't need to do this. You just can be very ordinary, you can be a nobody and have a fantastic life.
Your service has saved your life. Your service has saved, that's why you're here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, even the relationships became better. So my husband jokingly said, I wish you had the stroke earlier.
Excuse me, guys.
When people come with their mutual vulnerability, the relationship actually grows up.
Absolutely. Because the fact was that I was crying and writing stuff in my diary, and what I was presenting was the strong woman. So when I would say, I have this issue, everybody would say, wait, you can manage it, listen to mine. So when I was on the bed, everybody said, you also have an issue? I said, yeah. So now when somebody has an issue and I'm not, and I say I'm busy in a meeting, I don't want to listen to everybody's issue, because, and then I say, no, today not your issue, you listen to mine.
I'll only add, I think the point you made about vulnerability, that type of openness and coming up even on the professional realm.
Absolutely.
When I came up with it, and I started my new company last February, I made a choice that in one of my company meetings, I came out and I talked about it. And as scary as it was really a turning point in my professional relationships, because for once, I was not showing up as this perfect, I got it all, I was real.
So my connection is stronger and better, because now they're not because of what I show, because of the person. So it's a heartfelt connection which is stronger, and
There's a comment right there.
I've actually very similar journey to yours and yours, so I will cut it short. Very, very similar journey. I think we
so good, we all have connected.
Yeah, we somehow have
Excellent.
very, it's like if you connect the dots backward, they just, all of them fit into a single curve. So at fibromyalgia too, it had this and that. So all of those things happen. I wrote a book on it, and again, very similar. So I just want to, share a line that I used on behalf of my protagonist in my book, because she had a very similar journey as mine, as predictably. And it's like, you can get leaves from office if you break your leg, but not if you break your heart. So the thing is, I'm very glad that this, unlike many other mental health conferences I've so far attended, and I've attended quite, many of them, given my own journey along the way. We are talking about the corporates here, which makes it really unique and very valuable to me. Do we still today, with all these conversations, among women, among peer groups, wherever, at the end of the day, when you are at your office desk and you have your boss and you are alone. As a pregnant woman, as a mentally ill, I wouldn't even use mental illness, I would say mental otherness. That's the word I choose. But whatever it is, you are alone and you are facing a system that is much more dogmatic than what we see in a woman forum like this. Let's be clear.
Yes.
Can you call up your boss and say, I'm not coming today because I don't feel like? Or do you have to say, oh, I have temperature, oh, my pressure is falling, or something like that? I mean, can we do that? Even in the corporates which provide HR support, even in the corporates which provide a helpline, can you call up your boss in the morning and say, I'm not coming because I don't feel like?
Well, I think I would love to just respond real quick to that, just because I think this brings up a top-down question.
Yes.
And so those of us that are, we talked about the glass ceiling or whatever, those of us that are in the C-suite who are running corporations, it's our job in our seat to make sure that you can.
Yes.
You could come into my office.
It's an problem. No, it's an age-chicken problem. You don't want to be the belly the cat person.
Absolutely.
You suffer because it's personal between you and your
Absolutely, but
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, guys. I'm extremely apologize for that. I'm really grateful for having such kind of intellectuals for different kind of countries. I'm extremely apologize for that, because we have other sessions also and we have to devote a time over there also. I'm extremely apologize for that, and I'm really grateful for that. I have such kinds of intellectuals across different kinds of countries. Thank you so much for that.
No, but I want to tell her. But seriously, your seniors should be telling into their
Good job.
entire organization.